All portraits tell a story. However, for my portraits, I tend to target a group that, for the most part, seems to be a forgotten group or avoided group in our society. For the most part, I have been targeting older homeless males. I have been targeting males specifically because to start this project out, I wanted to focus on a smaller segment of the population in order to show a greater variety.
A lot of people might tend to think that I'm targeting this group just because they look interesting or they're weird. While that may have been how this started, that's definitely not the direction that I've gone with this.
This is where ethics comes into the situation, and where my opinions have changed. Where my opinions have changed are how we physically view people, and how I believe that everyone is interesting and beautiful in their own right. And I think that that's something that I try to convey.
These people stand out from the crowd, they're interesting. I see this as a positive aspect, not a negative one. I choose to represent these people in a way that I feel respects them while at the same time really creates an eye-catching image, and it makes the viewer want to sit and look and observe and continue looking at the image. And one way that I do this is I always make sure that in the portraits themselves, the up-close portraits, that there's always eye contact with the cameras, so that when the images are printed, there's always direct eye contact with the viewer. And I think that that's one thing that really captures the viewer and really makes it more interesting. Whereas if whoever was depicted was looking off in the other direction, I think it wouldn't make it as strong.
One thing I really worry about is how people are going to respond to me approaching them and talking to them. And that's something I always think about while I'm approaching them. Before I approach someone, I always try to study them, even if it's only for a second, to try to judge their body language and maybe their reactions to me trying to make eye contact with them. Because I do this, even just for the couple seconds that I do before I approach them, it really gives me a higher success rate in the amount of people that agree to allow me to take their portrait. And then, because I also do this beforehand, it also gives me a good indication as to who would be willing to talk to me and give me a little bit more of a story than the people who break eye contact with me immediately or show other signs of body language that don't seem quite as inviting as some of the ones that I have taken pictures of. Once I do approach them and they agree to let me take their portrait, the hardest thing is that I only have a few seconds to actually explain what I'm doing in more detail and get their portrait, because a lot of the time they don't really have the patience for me to just sit and talk to them. If they are willing to talk, then it's usually just them telling their story, which is good. I want that. I want a background story with the portrait. But it doesn't give me much of an opportunity to actually take their portrait because they don't want a camera in their face for 5 minutes as I take 50 portraits of them. They don't really understand that. Most of them just expect that I'm going to take one picture. Even when I take 4 or 5, some of them might stop and look and ask what I'm doing, why am I taking so many pictures. So that's one issue that I tend to run into as I'm talking to these people. And because of that, I really don't have more than maybe 15, 20 seconds, maybe a minute at the most, to really get a good portrait, and I really have to use the most of my time. And there have been a few times that I have messed up opportunities to maybe get a great portrait because I just couldn't frame something right, or I had my settings just a little bit off and something just didn't turn out exactly the way I wanted it to. However, I know these are issues that I need to work on in this project to expand it even more and diversify it to an even larger group of people to make it that much more interesting.